I'm really, really pleased to be joined today by Baroness Susan Greenfield, who is the CEO and founder of NeuroBio. Susan, thank you ever so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure, Kate.
Thank you. Thank you for giving up the time to talk to me today. Um, you've obviously got a really interesting career behind you, and so preparing the questions for today, trying to distill it down into
Well,
anything concise, it's
mhm.
really hard. So I'm going to start with quite a general question, which is across your career from some sort of neuroscience at Oxford, leading at the Royal Institution, and now running NeuroBio, how has your idea of what makes somebody the right hire changed over time?
How's it changed?
Mm,
Uh, well, I think obviously IT's made a big difference and the impact of
yes,
IT facility with social media. And I'm old enough to remember in the old days for PAs, they had to do shorthand and have been professional PAs, and been
right.
trained to do that and do how to type and so on. And that's
Mm,
shifted entirely now. You look for a facility with social media and people that are comfortable um, with that and not necessarily trained to be um,
mm,
someone who is APA as such. I think it's a much more flexible role now that people can, if they've got common sense and digital skills and a good presentation, then it's a much more blurred sort of job spec than it was in the old days. Yeah.
definitely. And does that apply to roles in general when you're hiring anybody within
Hmm.
biotech?
Well, well, in my case, it's very different because there's a sharp divide between hiring scientists or hiring people that are going to be management, and that would include PAs,
Yes.
of course. Now, the scientists, in a way, it's easier because you have a very specific set of skills that you require.
Mm,
Very few people, or far fewer people, have them, and in a sense, the emphasis is on them having those skills rather than how they will relate to you or how they relate to others. It's a
mm,
much simpler sort of, how can I say this, guns for hire, as it were, and that you want a specific skill, they come in and they do it. It's great if you get on with them and if they have the soft skills, but the soft skills aren't as important. And it's very easy to specify the technical skills you want, and it's very obvious. People either have them or they don't have them. They've got the training or they haven't. So, in a sense, hiring scientists is easier than hiring management, where you need a lot of soft skills. You're
mm.
looking much more for what kind of experience they've had in the past, how it impacts on what they need for the job that you're looking for, and so on.
That's really interesting, actually. I hadn't
Mm.
thought about it like that with the nuance that's required to hire for management. I suppose that really is quite difficult to
Well,
do in
yeah.
a
Well, I
way.
think it's first of all you have to get on individually with the chemistry,
Yes.
and then I'm sure you'll know more than me. Every organization has its own kind of culture and its own
Mm,
way of doing things. That NeuroBio, my company, happens to be. I'm the oldest by several decades, so it's a young company. Um, we have more women than men, and we have people from a whole variety of ethnicities and lots of
mm,
students. Now that makes for a very different environment from the typical biotech company, which is sort of usually middle-aged white men in suits, with their hands on their hips.
mm.
We're not like that, and I'm proud we're not like that. But it means if someone comes in expecting that kind of ethos, I know that they won't fit very well or they won't feel comfortable in our kind of organization. I'm not saying our
Yeah,
organization is better than the others. It fits me, but it has to be the culture has to fit as well as the skills and as well as the individual relationships. Those things I think are very important.
absolutely. And it must be sort of a million miles away from where you started, sort of leading that kind of a team.
Yeah.
What are the main differences that you've noticed within your team in comparison to kind of where you started your career?
Well, I started my career at Oxford University, and then,
Mm,
as you know, at the Royal Institution, which is much more traditional, and it's a not-for-profit, and those things make a difference very
yeah.
much. Um, uh, the Royal Institution was very much public-facing, so the people that
Yeah.
we employed there had to be people that could be presentable to and get on with the whole range of the general public that came in. Whereas running a
Hmm.
biotech, it doesn't really matter what you wear, for example, because it's not
Yeah.
public facing. The only public facing is the PA who has to talk on the phone to people. But on the whole, it's a very different kind of relationship you have. And people often ask when they come in, is there a dress code? And of course, we just say, well, as long as you're vaguely respectable, don't wear beachwear.
Yeah.
But it's not the kind of ethos that we would have had at the Royal Institution, say, where people had to look smarter than they would have perhaps on a Sunday at home.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? It is very interesting how that has evolved.
Mm,
And I mean, obviously you've had to look for very different things and very
mm,
different, not just technical skills, but as you say, sort of cultural elements in people
yeah,
across the different stages
yeah,
of your career.
yeah.
For example, in the Royal Institution, obviously you've just mentioned, but when you're hiring for neurobio, is there something really specific that stands out to you that makes you think actually this person's really going to
Yeah,
thrive in
yeah,
this
there is.
environment?
There is. And I think this has applied over the years and it
Mm,
applies to everything. And I would, anyone watching this, I would, tell them if they if they take any takeaway message, take away this
mm,
is enthusiasm. Nothing
right.
beats enthusiasm. That's not to say you're going gushing, but people that seem cool or sophisticated think they the impression they know it all, even if they do, aren't as attractive to hire as people that may not have all the boxes ticked, but are really keen and enthusiastic. Yeah. And for me, enthusiasm, because if people can't be bothered, then why should I be, But if
Oh,
someone's really
absolutely.
enthusiastic, you give them the work, you give them the earth, because they're so enthusiasm, and that's something that doesn't come with a qualification, it doesn't cost anything. You either generate that. And if you don't feel particularly enthusiastic, then do make an effort to
Mm,
smile and to be positive about the job. So that counts for everything. And bear in mind that when you're
absolutely.
interviewing people, you have in mind when you're interviewing someone, am I going to be able to face this person on a Monday morning? Am I going to be cheered up when I see this person?
Mm,
That makes it.
yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Because that I was about to ask you actually, is that something that you feel you can spot pretty early on? Is that something that you look for in a first interview with a person?
Yeah. Well, you don't really have to look for it. It's there. You don't really
Mm,
have probe if someone comes in, and you can just tell if someone's switched
yeah.
on and they're excited by it.
And
um
they need to be excited by the science, right? They
oh, certainly, yeah. In our case that's not hard because we're trying to get a better treatment for Alzheimer's, so if that
yes.
doesn't excite anyone, then there's something wrong with them. So for,
I mean,
for us it's
yeah,
a given, and we don't really have to sell too hard what we're trying to do, but
not at all.
enthusiasm, and someone, well, certainly who looks like they have a sense of humor, um and will fit in with who'll be a team player. So
Yeah,
someone who
definitely.
doesn't have prescriptive, listen, well, that's not my job, or I'm not doing that, I'm not paid to do it. That kind of person. I mean, it's obvious,
Yeah.
isn't it, that they're not going to be as appealing as someone who rolls up their sleeves. And someone else said to me something once, which I thought was good, which you should always work above your grade, and then yeah. And then, so for example, I knew someone's daughter, who in the summer holidays was the washer up in a restaurant. Okay, she was the lowest of the low. She was doing the washing up, but she wore makeup, she wore smart clothes, and looked really well turned out. Guess what? Soon promoted, to front of house, and then and so having started off in a very kind of starter modest job by dressing above her grade, dressing not like someone who was doing washing up, but by dressing as someone who's front of house. Guess what? She ended up front of house. Yeah.
People exude that energy, don't
Mm.
they? They
Yeah.
it's deep, very deeply within that person.
Yeah. I think
I
also it's
totally agree.
important not to have this notion of entitlement,
Oh
entitled to
yeah.
so many days off, entitled to just work these fixed hours. People that give the impression that they wouldn't mind if push comes to shove, running the extra mile or staying a bit longer. That goes down
Mm,
well. It's not as though you expect it, but someone who is just there, as work for hire, and that's it. And then they go home no matter what, exactly on the clock. That's not as compelling as someone who
no.
really believes in what you're trying to do. And well, certainly in small companies anyway.
Absolutely, and with the sort of field of research that you're doing and the the developments that you're making, that really is quite an important requirement,
Yeah, well,
given
the thing is,
the magnitude of.
yeah, if you're not, well, the scientists, as I have to explain to non-scientists when they come, um,
Mm,
it's not just that they need to pay the mortgage, it's that they really believe in what they're doing and it's part of their identity. So very easy, if something doesn't work, they'll be depressed. If something does work, they'll be really excited, and that has nothing to do with money. Yeah.
mm,
And it's very hard, perhaps, for a non-scientist to grasp why suddenly someone's very excited or very depressed over a few squiggles on a page, which they don't understand. And that is because we're all trying to do something above and beyond just pay the rent and so on. Yeah.
oh
So,
yeah,
and I think if you're privileged enough to have a job like that, and it is a privilege, then it can
for
be
sure.
infectious, and people join in and get excited by what's happening, and that's great.
It's lovely. It's really, really lovely to see.
Yeah.
Um, I would like to ask you one more question, if that's
Please.
okay,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is looking back, has there been a hire at any stage in your career who has taught you a lasting lesson about spotting potential in somebody, whether that's somebody that you ended up hiring that you
Mm.
initially didn't think was going to fit, or, you know, just kind of any
Yeah, no,
particular
here's a
lesson
last
there?
one, and yeah, there's, so when I was still at the university,
Mm,
I had, so it was very funny because I needed a PA, and the guy I played squash with, I was talking to
mm,
him about it, and he said his girlfriend would do it. And I said, well, you better ask her first. You can't just volunteer for the job. And it turned out the girlfriend, who was 18 at the time, had been working in hospitality and therefore working antisocial hours and so on
mm.
relatively low pay. Yeah? So this to her apparently seemed a gift because it was office hours 5 days a week, and the salary was better. Yeah? So she came having been volunteered by the boyfriend. Yeah. And she stayed with me for 12 years. Now, what
Wow.
happened there is because she was young, she was really enthusiastic because for her
Mm,
this was a real change. Yeah? She wasn't in any way qualified to be a PA, like I said, but she had worked in hospitality. So that meant she was very used to interfacing with all types of people, being good on the phone, being reliable, all the things
mm,
that you might not think are totally important, but reliability, courtesy, a good manner, well presented, all that. And it was a huge success. She stayed with me for a very long time. And in a sense, coming very young, someone said, well,
mm.
someone 18, how can that be? Yeah, actually gives you a chance to, I won't say mold them because that old group, I certainly won't say groom, but gives you a chance. You don't have to undo preconceptions and undo people that are set in their ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that people come with an open mind, willing to learn, rather than telling you how it should be. I think that helped as well. So that was one of the most successful hires I've ever had. Yeah.
Wow. Because
Mm.
I do think there's an awful lot to be said about transferable skills. Just because somebody doesn't immediately present as having experience in that particular role
Exactly.
or field doesn't
Yeah.
mean they're not going to do a
No,
good
and you
job,
should look
right?
for potential and then play to someone's strengths. And there's people don't, the basic type of people don't. If someone is intrinsically very into detail and very
Mm,
kind of slow, they're not going to suddenly have wild ideas and be very, and similarly, someone that isn't very good on detail isn't suddenly going to become very good on detail. So I think we have to recognize that and work around it, or,
mm,
play to whatever strengths they have.
absolutely.
Mm.
Oh, well, Susan, thank you ever so much. We touched on some things today that I has really given me pause for thought.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
really excited to see what comes out of
Well, good luck with
neurobio
everything.
in the
And thank you for
future.
doing this. I think it's very valuable for people.
Thank you ever so much.
My
Thank you for your
pleasure.
time.
Okay, all the
You take
best.
care.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.